You must be swift as the coursing river, with all the force of a great typhoon, all the strength of a raging fire, mysterious as the dark side of the moon. Now, in case you didn't recognize it, those are the lyrics to the chorus of I'll Make a Man Out of You from the 1998 animated classic Mulan. I was 10 years old when that movie came out, but I remember watching it for the first time and loving this song in particular. Of course, the film's critique of outdated gender roles went completely over my head. To 10-year-old Kyle, these lyrics were something to aspire to. They became part of my own blueprint in how to be a man. And that expectation had already been amplified by nearly every aspect of the world around me. My name's Kyle Key. I use he, him pronouns. I advise honors students at the University of Cincinnati. I hold a master's degree in social work, and I have struggled with the pressure of masculine expectations my entire life. I'm not alone in this. Hegemonic masculine traits are reinforced early and often in our society, describing how young boys and male-identifying folks in general are expected to act. Hegemonic masculinity refers to this rigid social structure that glorifies men who express these traits in dominant and elite ways, often at the expense of other genders. I want to call out 5 of the most recognizable aspects of hegemonic masculinity: strength, courage, independence, assertiveness, and stoicism. Stoicism is the most alarming of these. This idea that a man should be stoic in the face of any stressor or life event thrown his way, and especially when it comes to those meddlesome emotions he might feel on the inside. He remains inscrutable, unmovable, mysterious as the dark side of the moon. This alarms me because stoicism often means suffering in silence. But each of these hegemonic traits plays a major role in preventing men from expressing themselves in healthy ways. In 2022, researchers in Brazil highlighted these traits as the primary reason that men do not reach out to mental health resources, because they believe it goes against the expectations of this hegemonic masculinity. Now, in addition to this, men tend to hold much more stigmatized views of mental health in general, especially with regard to depression. So what happens when there's a universal stressor like never before? A global pandemic that kills millions, jeopardizes every part of life we once took for granted, and leaves us all feeling powerless. The circumstances around COVID-19 mean that we've all experienced heightened levels of distress. And once a sustained level of distress exceeds our natural ability to cope, that is when we experience mental health symptoms. So it should come as no surprise that mental health struggles have been much more prevalent since March 2020. Practitioners in the field believe that rates of depression, anxiety, and suicide have all increased. In fact, experts warn that we are in the early stages of a mental health pandemic, the full impact of which won't be realized for years to come. Men's mental health was already a major but often unspoken concern even before the pandemic, with 75% of deaths by suicide attributed to male-identifying people. So we must consider, with a new mental health crisis looming, how this will further impact the mental well-being of men. And that is why addressing hegemonic masculinity is so urgent. Now, most discussions I see around unhealthy masculine traits tend to either encourage individuals to reject them entirely, or they provide this high-level esoteric overview of the issue without offering any actionable steps toward a solution. What I want to provide today is a blueprint, a path forward for a new masculinity. And I'm also going to provide a step-by-step way to transform these masculine traits into more powerful, healthier versions. The key to this process is vulnerability. And rather than simply talk about its benefits, I'm going to provide this blueprint on how to build it as a skill. Now, anyone of any gender identity can struggle under these hegemonic masculine traits. And of course, there's value in everyone developing vulnerability as a skill, but I see it underdeveloped in this specific population, and that's why I'm talking about it here and now. The onus of this work is on men, but we all have a role to play in sharing and spreading this message. By establishing vulnerability as a skill, we will see the mental health of men improve. They will engage in healthier displays of masculinity, greater empathy toward other genders, and have better understanding of others' lived experiences. All of society stands to benefit. First, we must look at the evidence that men actually want to share their struggles with others. Consider the strong link between hegemonic masculinity and agrarian values. Strength, hard work, problem solving in an independent fashion. It makes sense how those are vital skills for farmers, right? One might also assume that these men are unwilling or unable to engage in vulnerable conversations. But in 2020, an interdisciplinary team of researchers across several Canadian universities found that rural men want to talk about their mental health, as well as align their expression of masculinity in a healthier way. In another study from 2011, researchers at University College Dublin specifically observed male participants who had never previously divulged their feelings able to engage in lengthy, emotionally heavy dialogue about their lives. So men want to share their feelings, but they're choosing not to. They're choosing not to due to the internal and external pressure of hegemonic masculinity, which encourages suffering in silence. But we can change the conversation and the expectation by introducing vulnerability as a skill. If we want to transform hegemonic masculinity, we must build vulnerability. Now, in this process, I'm defining vulnerability as the sharing of meaningful things with others. Emotions, stressors, hopes, dreams, fears, these are the same things that hegemonic masculinity encourages men to keep to themselves for fear of ridicule, of seeming weak or less than. But in establishing vulnerability, I'm going to prove that these fears are unfounded. So here's the step-by-step blueprint on how to build this as a skill. First, identify the most trusted person in your life. Partner, parent, sibling, friend, whomever it might be, select them as the foundation of your support system. The next time you're having a bad day, talk to them about it, but make this practice about more than the events that led to the bad day. Share how you're feeling. Try to name the emotion. For example, today was just horrible. There was too much to do, too much going on. I was just overwhelmed. But let's also name the emotion there. I think I'm just afraid of not doing what I need to do for everyone in my life. Now, this practice can also be positive. When you surprised me with lunch, it really made my day. But even then, we want to name the emotion. It made me think how much I care about you. I really love you. That's vulnerability. If the person you're sharing with falls into the trap of trying to fix whatever struggle you might be describing, let them know that's not what you're looking for, that you're just wanting to share, you're trying to build a skill. Your feelings should be validated, not fixed. You can't fix feelings anyway. They come and go, but you can change how you react to them and how you share them with others. So, continue sharing with this trusted person. Remind yourself that with each repetition, being vulnerable will come more and more easily. The next step in this process is expanding the circle outward, from your romantic partner to your best friend, or maybe your best friend to your parents. Maybe it's another family member, or even a coworker. But the goal here, once you have selected that next most trusted person, is to not expand the circle too much too fast. This is a gradual process. Once you have this next individual that you begin sharing with, go through the same steps. Share the bad days, share the struggles, but name the feelings as well. Name the emotions. That's important. Now, an early draft of this talk had me at this point asking you in the audience to turn to the person nearest to you and share something vulnerable about yourself. You can see why that didn't make the cut, right? It is completely counterintuitive to the steps I'm describing, which is identifying someone you trust enough to go a little bit out of your comfort zone. Because for most all of us, the experience of sharing something vulnerable with a stranger is going to be so uncomfortable, we validly shut down. And none of us are going to build a skill if our experience in practicing it is one of shutting down. So that is why sticking to this process is so important. Sticking with those trusted people, practicing with them, and then slowly and gradually expanding that circle of trusted folks outward. As you continue to do this, you'll be able to be vulnerable with many different people in your life. You now have the concepts, the rationale, the blueprint. It's a simple process, right? But we shouldn't equate simple with easy. This is still going to be difficult because for many men, it means having to go against that hegemonic structure they've lived with their entire lives. But this is where I want to prove we are actually working with masculine traits and not against them. Strength, courage, independence, assertiveness, and stoicism. By establishing vulnerability as a skill, you'll be a beacon of strength for others in your life because you consistently demonstrate how you effectively cope with all of life's struggles. The nature of sharing things in and of itself takes immense courage, and being able to share these hidden parts of yourself will allow you to grow in self-awareness and self-worth, which are vital to your independence. Similarly, a greater sense of self allows you to build confidence and assertiveness. Many things in life don't seem as scary or intimidating once you're accustomed to being vulnerable, once you've brought them out into the light. That leaves us with stoicism. Practicing vulnerability actually increases the threshold of hardships you can endure. Because although you can take on more life's stressors, you also know when it's appropriate to share them with others. This is what I've seen in my own life, that vulnerability transforms how I display masculinity. The traits remain, but I express them in healthier ways, and I have more tools to navigate life's stressors. A few years ago, I had a conversation with my close friend Dave. We were completely honest with each other for the first time after 15 years of friendship. I talked about my struggles with anxiety, he talked about his struggles with depression, and it brought us closer together. There was no judgment, there was only understanding. There was no fixing, there was only validation. And since that time, the moments we've spent together have felt more genuine, more real. We've been able to talk about anything. We've been able to more often and more easily express our love for one another. That level of support has made my life better. It's helped me to not feel so alone. Since the conversation Dave and I had, we have been very open in talking about mental health, therapy, medication, and we've extended those conversations into other areas of our lives, with other friends, with our partners too. Now, in my role as an honors advisor, I have engaged in countless conversations over the years where I both encouraged and modeled vulnerability. During the COVID-19 lockdown months, I met with a male student who talked about how sad and helpless he was feeling. I validated those feelings. I shared that I had experienced similar ones. And since that time, he's been very open in discussing difficult things with me. We finally got to meet in person a year later, and I remember it being this wonderful blend of highs and lows. At the end of our time, he abruptly stood up and asked me for a hug. As we embraced, I was struck by two thoughts: how uncommon these interactions are among men, but also how much hope I had that he was learning the value of vulnerability at a much younger age than I had. See, my life has roughly followed this same process that I'm describing to you today. But I didn't have a blueprint to follow. I didn't have the benefits of vulnerability described to me in advance, that it provides a greater awareness of myself and a greater connection to others. I had to trip and stumble to find my way into this, to see how vulnerability can overcome the barriers of hegemonic masculinity. But this is a path anyone can experience, even decades into their life and their relationships. It simply requires you to take the first steps in practicing it for yourself. then this is my invitation to examine yourselves and build vulnerability into your lives. If you as a man have been there and done that, then I'm asking you to model the value of vulnerability, and I'm asking you to mentor and encourage those who are still suffering in silence. If you're not male identifying, then I'm asking you to be aware of those around you who are on their own journeys and support them in the ways that make sense to you. With enough individuals practicing this skill, we can begin to see positive change. We can begin to see vulnerability as the new expectation for men. And as our respective generations experience that positive change, the younger generations who look to us for guidance as role models will see a different way forward, a better way forward. So let us put in the time and intention to make that future a reality for us and for them. Thank you so very much.